My son said I wouldn't understand. Then he showed up at my farmhouse with 12 people, suitcases, coolers, and enough food for a 3-day vacation. They expected the spare key under the flower pot, just like always. I'm 76 years old. I buried my husband 11 years ago. And somewhere along the way, my children stopped seeing me as their mother and started seeing me as a free place to stay. Last Tuesday, my own son removed me from the family group chat because I'm not a working adult. What he didn't know was that my husband left something hidden beneath our bedroom floorboards. Something powerful enough to change everything they thought belonged to them. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about the moment a mother finally stops begging to be loved. I'm Margaret. And this is what I did when my family forgot whose house they were standing in. Before we begin, subscribe to Family Secret Stories, because some family betrayals deserve to be remembered forever. Removed when your own child removes you from a family chat because you're not a working adult, you have two choices: cry or remember exactly where you hid the documents. My son Andrew did it on a Tuesday morning. I know because I was standing at my kitchen sink, hands still wet from washing the same coffee cup I've used for 15 years. The sun hit my tomato plants outside the window. Then my phone went quiet. No notification, no warning. Just a gray message where our family conversation used to be: you can no longer send messages to this group. At first, I laughed, a nervous, confused little laugh, because who removes their mother from a family chat? That doesn't happen, not in real families, so I called him. The phone rang 4 times. When he finally answered, he sounded irritated, like I had interrupted something important. "Mom, I'm busy." I told him about the chat, kept my voice light, even made a joke about the phone breaking. He didn't laugh. There was a long silence. Then I heard him exhale, the way you do when you're explaining something to a child. "Mom, that group is for working adults. You wouldn't understand what we talk about anyway." I didn't answer, not because I had nothing to say, because my throat closed up. My own son had just made me feel invisible in under 10 seconds. And the worst part, he sounded reasonable, like he was doing me a favor by being honest. I'm 76 years old. I worked since I was 14. I buried a husband. I raised 2 children who barely call me anymore. I sold vegetables at outdoor markets in freezing rain while other mothers stayed home. I saved coins in glass jars so my son could go to university. But suddenly, I wasn't an adult anymore. I was just an old woman they tolerated, a name on a phone they didn't have to answer. After he hung up, I sat at the kitchen table until my tea went cold. I told myself the same lies mothers always tell. He's stressed. He didn't mean it. You know how boys are. We translate cruelty into excuses. We rewrite their words until they stop cutting so deep. Then, 3 days later, my daughter-in-law texted me, not to apologize, just one sentence. "Margaret, leave the spare key under the flower pot. We're coming Friday with the kids." No please, no thank you, no is that okay? They had planned an entire weekend at my farmhouse without ever asking me. And that's when I realized something I hadn't admitted in 11 years. Nobody in that family had asked me a single question about myself in over 6 months. Not, how are you? Not, do you need anything? Just demands wrapped in casual cruelty. I put the phone down. I walked outside to my garden, and I didn't feel sad anymore. I remembered the loose floorboard in my bedroom and the metal box underneath, and the promise my dead husband made me swear on his last night alive. That was the moment everything changed. The free vacation house, my farmhouse, stopped feeling like mine years ago. After my husband Mykola died, the visits became expectations, then routines, then obligations. The spare key stayed under the large clay flower pot beside the gate because family shouldn't need permission. That's what Andrea told me once. Slowly, my home became their free vacation house. They arrived with dirty shoes and empty coolers. They left with leftovers, clean laundry, and bags full of vegetables from my garden. Nobody asked if I was tired. Nobody noticed that I cleaned for 2 days after every visit, or that my pension disappeared into groceries they never paid for. One summer, my grandson broke the patio table running around inside after I asked 3 times for them to play outside. Andrea shrugged. It was old anyway. Another time, someone stained the guest room carpet with wine. My daughter-in-law laughed. Well, houses are meant to be lived in. But nobody lived there except me. I cooked. I washed sheets. I bought meat. I filled the refrigerator before every visit because I thought that was what love looked like. Maybe loneliness makes women confuse usefulness with love. The worst part wasn't the mess. It was how invisible I became. I would stand in my own kitchen while conversations moved around me like I was furniture. Politics, money, vacations, business, and every time I tried to speak, someone interrupted gently. Mom, don't worry about it. You wouldn't get it. That's complicated. As if I hadn't spent my whole life solving impossible things. As if I hadn't kept a roof over their heads when the bills kept coming and there was no one to help. That Thursday evening, I drove to the farmhouse one day before they arrived. Petro, the man who has maintained the property for nearly 20 years, opened the gate. One look at my face and he knew something was wrong. "You okay, Margaret?" I forced a smile. "Just tired." He didn't believe me, but kind people understand silence. He made tea and left me alone in the living room. That's where I saw it. The old brown leather notebook on the shelf beside Mykola's chair. The one he stitched with his own hands 40 years ago. I hadn't opened it in years. And standing there with my cold tea and my family arriving in less than 24 hours, I remembered something my children never cared enough to ask about. Something my husband told me on the night before he died. Something I had buried so deep I almost believed it never happened. I reached for the notebook. My fingers were shaking, and I had no idea that what I was about to find would destroy every plan my children had for my property. The notebook had been with us for over 40 years. Mike Hola stitched the leather himself during a winter when money was tight and he refused to waste anything. Every page inside carried pieces of our life. Roof repairs. The well installation. Apple trees planted in 1989. How many jars of cherries we sold at the market every August. How many hryvnias remained after taxes? To anyone else, it looked like junk. Old receipts. Stains. Pages falling out. But to me, it was proof that nothing in that house appeared by magic. We built everything with our backs, our hands, and years we could never get back. Andrea hated that notebook as a child, said it smelled old, said it made the house feel poor. But Mike Hola always smiled and told him, "One day you'll understand what real wealth looks like." He never did. I opened the notebook slowly. Receipts slipped out, old photographs, notes written in my husband's crooked handwriting. Then I reached the final pages. The pages nobody knew existed. My breath caught in my throat because suddenly I remembered the hidden compartment beneath our bedroom floor. And what we had placed there years ago, not money, something far more dangerous, documents, the kind capable of changing ownership, inheritance, and loyalty. I sat there on the couch with tears running down my face, not sad tears. I couldn't even name what I was feeling. Relief, anger, hope, all of it mixed together. Mike Hola had known. Somehow, even back then, he had known that our children would grow up and forget who we were. That they would treat this house like a hotel and me like a maid. That love would turn into convenience. And he had done something about it. While I was busy making excuses, he was making plans. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was sad, but because after 11 years of feeling invisible, I was finally thinking clearly. I lay in bed and listened to the wind and remembered every single time I had been dismissed, every rolled eye, every sigh. Every time Andrea said, "Mom, don't worry about it," like I was a child. I remembered my daughter laughing when I couldn't figure out how to send a photo. I remembered my grandchildren looking at me like I was from another century. And I remembered Mike Hola's voice. "Promise me you won't let them take this from you." I had promised, and then I had forgotten. But the notebook didn't forget, and neither would I. What I didn't know yet was that my son was about to do something so cruel. It would erase the last bit of guilt I had left. Andrea arrives Friday afternoon. Andrea arrived first. As always, he walked into the house without knocking, without greeting me, without removing his shoes. I stood near the dining table holding the notebook against my chest. He glanced at me briefly. "Oh, you're already here." Already here? In my own house. I asked him calmly why nobody told me they were coming. He rolled his eyes like an exhausted father dealing with a difficult child. "Mom, we've done this every summer." "That's not the point." He opened the refrigerator. "Do we have beer?" I stared at him. Then I finally asked the question that had been burning inside me for days. Why did you remove me from the family chat? He sighed loudly. Mom, don't start. You embarrassed me. That made him laugh, actually laugh. We just didn't want to deal with drama. Drama. I buried that word inside me beside all the others. Then his eyes landed on the notebook. What's that? He grabbed it from my hands before I could answer, flipped through pages carelessly. Receipts fell onto the floor. Old photographs bent under his fingers. Then he smirked. You still keep this garbage? My chest tightened. It's your father's. So? And before I could stop him, he tossed the notebook into the kitchen trash bin. Like garbage. Like my husband's entire life could fit beside potato peels and empty bottles. Then he looked around the room and said, You should clean up a little before everyone gets here. That was the exact moment something inside me stopped begging to be loved. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there and watched him walk out the door to buy charcoal. Then I walked to the trash bin. I pulled the notebook out. I wiped coffee grounds off the leather cover with my sleeve, and I heard my Cola's voice in my head. Never leave important things where careless people can touch them. The rest of the family arrived around 4. My daughter Olna gave me a quick hug that felt like a handshake. Mom, you look tired. Not, how are you? My daughter-in-law started rearranging my kitchen. The grandchildren ran straight to the TV room without saying hello. And Andrew lit the grill like he owned the place. I stood in the corner of my own kitchen and watched them. What they didn't know was that I had already made my decision. And what they really didn't know was hidden under my bedroom floor. Under the floorboards that night, while everyone laughed outside near the grill, I locked myself inside the bedroom. The same bedroom where my husband took his final breath. I knelt beside the bed and lifted the loose wooden floorboard. It still opened easily, exactly where we left it. Inside was a metal box wrapped in cloth. My hands trembled while I opened it. Property documents, original land contracts, bank papers, and one sealed envelope with my husband's handwriting. For Margaret only. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter dated 11 years earlier. My dear Margaret, if you are reading this, it means they stopped seeing you. It means you are standing in this room alone while they eat your food and sleep in your beds and forget that you are their mother. Don't give this house to people who only love what it provides. You are not a convenience. You never were. I read those words 3 times. Then I unfolded the final paper, and everything changed. Because legally, the farmhouse no longer belonged to the family. It hadn't for years. 11 years ago, after my Cola's diagnosis, we transferred the property into a protected trust. I had forgotten, or maybe I had chosen to forget. The paperwork was complicated. Lawyers, signatures, notarized statements. But Mike Cola had handled all of it. He had made sure that if the house was ever used against my wishes, if I was ever treated like a guest in my own home, ownership would automatically transfer elsewhere. And 2 months before his death, he added one final condition. The farmhouse would go to the person who truly cared for me in my final years. Not the loudest, not the most successful, not even family by blood, just the one who stayed. I sat on the bedroom floor with papers spread around me like fallen leaves. Outside my window, I could hear Andrea laughing, my daughter-in-law complaining about the mosquitoes, the grandchildren screaming. None of them had any idea. None of them had ever asked about the metal box, about the loose floorboard, about the notebook. They thought I was just an old woman with an old house. They had no idea that my husband had outsmarted every single one of them from beyond the grave. I stayed in that bedroom until the fire outside died down. Then I made a decision. Tomorrow morning, I would show them exactly who I really was, and there would be no turning back. The locked gate Saturday morning began with chaos. Cars lined the road. Children screamed. Coolers rolled across gravel. 12 people arrived expecting another free weekend. But this time, the gate was locked. No spare key waited beneath the flower pot. Instead, hanging from the iron gate was the old leather notebook. And beneath it, a sealed envelope. I watched from the upstairs window as confusion turned into anger. My daughter-in-law called me 6 times. I didn't answer. My daughter texted, "Mom, the gate is locked." Then Andrea started pounding on the metal bars. "Mom, what is this? Open up." I stayed quiet. A few minutes later, I watched Petro walk outside carrying the envelope. He had agreed to help me the night before without hesitation. "Margaret asked me to give you this," he said. Andrea snatched it from his hands. Inside were copies of the legal documents, the trust papers, the ownership transfer, and one handwritten sentence from me. "You stopped treating me like family long before I locked the gate." The screaming started almost immediately. I could hear my daughter yelling that I had lost my mind, my son demanding explanations, my daughter-in-law crying because she had already planned the next 3 weekends. Someone started shaking the gate. Andrea called me. I finally answered on the 5th call. "What is this nonsense? It's ownership papers. You can't do this." "I already did." Silence. Then his voice changed, smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way I had never heard before. "What do you mean the house isn't ours?" I looked around the living room slowly. At the curtains I sewed myself, the wooden shelves Mykola built, the walls we painted together. "This house was never yours," I said quietly. "You just got comfortable using it." He started yelling again, something about lawyers, something about respect, something about how I was embarrassing the family. I let him yell. I had spent years listening to his excuses. I could listen a few more minutes. When he finally stopped, I said, "The property goes to the person who actually cared about me, not the people who showed up for free food." "Who?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I just hung up. Through the window, I saw my son's face go pale. He didn't know yet that the biggest shock was still coming. The truth by noon, the whole family was gathered outside the gate like strangers. Some had driven 4 hours for this weekend. They had brought coolers and sleeping bags and bottles of wine. They had planned hikes and barbecues and late nights by the fire. Now they were standing on a dirt road, staring at a locked gate. Andrew called me back. This time his voice was different, not angry, desperate. "Mom, please, just open the gate. We'll talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. The kids are hungry. There's a store 20 minutes down the road." He paused. Then he said something that almost broke me. "Mom, I'm sorry about the chat. I didn't mean it." But I knew he did mean it. He meant it when he said it. He was only sorry now because he was losing something. Not me, the house, the free weekends, the convenience. "Who gets the property?" he asked again. I looked outside the window. Petro was standing by the garden, pretending not to listen. He had shown up for 20 years. He had fixed my roof when no one else would. He had brought me soup when I was sick. He had sat with me in the hospital after my fall, holding my hand while my children texted that they were too busy to visit. "The person who stayed," I said. Then I hung up. The screaming outside got louder. My daughter started crying. My son-in-law threatened to call a lawyer. My daughter-in-law said I was mentally unwell and needed to be evaluated. I heard every word, and none of it touched me. Because I realized something standing there at that window. They weren't upset about losing me. They were upset about losing what I gave them, and that is a very different thing. I walked downstairs. I opened the front door. I walked to the gate. 12 faces stared at me, some angry, some confused. One, my oldest granddaughter, looked almost ashamed. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. "The documents are real," I said. "You can check with any lawyer." The house was never yours to inherit. It was always mine to give away, and I gave it to someone who earned it. "Who?" Andrew screamed. I looked at Petro. He looked at me. And after 11 years of swallowing their disrespect, I finally smiled. A real smile. "Petro," I said. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Outside the gate, nobody grilled meat that weekend. Nobody laughed in my garden. By sunset, the cars slowly disappeared one by one down the road. No hugs, no apologies. Just anger and wounded pride and the sound of gravel under tires. My daughter left first, crying loudly so everyone could hear. My daughter-in-law followed, still on the phone with someone, probably telling them how horrible I was. The grandchildren waved awkwardly from the back windows. They didn't understand. Maybe one day they would. Andrew remained near the gate longer than the others. He stood there with his arms crossed, staring at the house like he was trying to memorize it. For a moment, I almost walked outside, almost comforted him. Old habits survive longer than love sometimes. But then I remembered his words. "That group is for working adults. You wouldn't understand." I watched my son stand outside the locked property like a stranger, and I finally admitted something to myself. They never truly wanted me. They wanted access. Access to comfort, to food, to memories they didn't build. But love without respect eventually becomes hunger, and hunger is never satisfied. That evening, Petro made tea while the sun disappeared behind the apple trees. The farmhouse felt quiet again, peaceful. Mine, we sat on the porch without talking much. That's the thing about kind people. They don't need to fill every silence with words. I opened my Cola's notebook one last time and ran my fingers across the final page. He had written something there years ago in that crooked handwriting of his. Real wealth is knowing who would stay if you had nothing left to give. I closed the notebook gently. Outside, the gate remained locked, and inside, after 11 years of being invisible, I finally felt safe. The phone buzzed one more time. Andrei, I didn't /answer. I didn't need to. Some conversations are over long before they end. Some families are just people who share blood but not kindness. And sometimes, an old woman with an old notebook and a locked gate is the strongest person in the room. I finished my tea. Petro went home. The stars came out, and I slept in my own bed, in my own house, with my husband's notebook on the nightstand beside me. No more cleaning before visits. No more buying groceries for people who don't say thank you. No more spare keys under flower pots. Just the quiet peace of finally being done.